What if beings from beyond our world were not just the stuff of science fiction, but neighbors we have yet to truly meet? What would change in your life if you could tap into your transdimensional abilities and connect with advanced cultures that offer new ways of healing, living, and expressing spiritually? And how might we transform ourselves and our planet by embracing these otherworldly connections with open hearts and curious minds? In this episode of Magical Professions, we welcome Karen Holton, author, wellness coach, educator, alternative practitioner, and fearless multidimensional explorer of the seen and unseen realms. Karen is the author of Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors, and Transdimensional 2, Meet the Greys picture book, where she shares her true accounts of encounters with diverse extraterrestrial beings, their cultures, and their deeply spiritual ways of life, experiences that have transformed her and may inspire us all to open our minds to the greater cosmic family. Join us as we explore Karen's magical profession, bridging dimensions, challenging our ideas of reality, and helping humanity prepare for a future where contact with the new neighbors may no longer be a question of if, but when. Oh, welcome, Karen. It's a great pleasure to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Karen, can you briefly introduce yourself and let our listeners know where you are joining us from what part of the world? Thank you.
I live in Alberta, Canada, in central Alberta, Canada, where it's very cold 6 months out of the year and then amazingly beautiful the other 6 months of the year. Oh, the snow is beautiful too, but it gets very cold. And I am pretty special. I'm a very ordinary person with a very ordinary life. And I was surprised as anybody that I started having these paranormal phenomena. I was not expecting it, wishing for it, praying for it, hoping for it, or even thinking about it. So it was a big surprise to me, but I'm happy it happened.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely we will go more in depth into it. But first, I would like to ask you about Canada and Alberta specifically from the point of view of maybe unusual, something extraordinary, maybe about the place, maybe about certain traditions, because here in our podcast, we explore something that is beyond our world of seen, yes, of what we're used to. Maybe you can share with us something about the place you live in.
Well, I think it's important for people to know that Alberta, especially the province of Canada where I live, is full of mystery and surprise. So we have all different kinds of geological areas. We have plains, we have mountains, we have rolling hills. But in the south of Alberta, they discover many, many dinosaur bones. So that's really interesting. But the other thing is, Alberta, Canada, I think is one of the only provinces that actually has a landing site built specifically for extraterrestrials. And another thing is we have many very ancient monolithic sites, just like there are all over the world. And all of that is found in Alberta, the province in Canada where I live.
That's absolutely amazing. And what about those landing sites just for ETs? Who built it? Can you tell a little bit more?
No, I don't have a lot of details. I'm sorry. People can Google it if they want to know more. But yeah, I was surprised when I moved here. There's quite a fascination with ETs. There's restaurants that are fashioned after UFOs with like flying saucers above them. And people seem to be quite excited about extraterrestrials where I live.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Karen. And we just talked with you before we started recording our podcast about your, I would call it magical profession, transdimensional traveler. You travel, but not like regular people travel just to different places, different countries. You are traveling into different worlds. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And how did you become this transdimensional traveler?
Well, like I said before, I was as surprised as anybody because I'm a very ordinary person with a very ordinary life. I have no special things about me, at least that I can see. I mean, we're all important in one way or another, but I don't really have anything to brag about. Then I actually have had some paranormal experiences during my life, but I was always taught either two things. I was taught that either you can't tell anybody because they're going to think you're crazy. And as soon as people think you're crazy, that's it. You have no credibility whatsoever. Nobody believes anything you have to say, and people don't even like you if you're crazy. Unfortunately, that is the climate of the culture that I was raised in. The other thing is, I kept going to different churches seeking answers. So I'll give you an example, and this is also in my book. I talk about my paranormal experiences as a child. So when I was about 5 years old, I was terrified of the dark and terrified at night. And I always knew that there were beings around us that we can't see, that we can't hear. But I knew they were there, but I didn't know what they were, and I had nobody to help me to understand what might be happening. So one night I was in my bed under the covers. I couldn't breathe because I had the covers tucked in so tight and I was so afraid. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice say, Karen, you don't have to be afraid anymore. And I peeked out from the covers, and here was this amazing griffin. And I didn't even know what a griffin was at the time. So I couldn't have made this up. And it was all made out of fire. And so a griffin has the head and wings of an eagle, but it has the body of a lion. And this griffin creature told me that it was there to protect me, and I did not ever have to worry again for when I wanted to go to sleep. And when I was afraid, all I had to do was like summon it in my mind, and it would come and protect me. And it did for many, many years. I don't know if this was a hallucination or whether this was some kind of lucid dreaming, or if this was an extraterrestrial using a screen memory so that I saw it in that form. I don't really know, but it really brought me a lot of support and comfort when I really, really needed it. And I've had other experiences where this is very strange. And it's true, but I don't expect anyone to believe me, honestly, on any of this, because if I heard someone else talking about it, I'd be very skeptical. But one night, this is when I was a grown up and I was living in an apartment, and there's a little bit of light streaming in the window from the street lamps that were probably 50, 70 feet away, or I'm not sure in kilometers, maybe 40 kilometers. No, would it be more or less? I don't know. But anyway, it was coming in the window, and all of a sudden I heard crashing under my bed, crashing and banging. And I knew it was my cat, and my cat was chasing something. And all I did was wonder what is going on under my bed. Instantly, I could see through my cat's eyes. I could see what my cat was seeing. And what I never knew up until that point was that we have some very large spiders in Canada. They're not venomous or poisonous, but they're quite large. What I didn't know is that when a cat sees something, it takes the ambient light into its eyes and it reflects it back out like little flashlights so that it can see better. And when it did this, the spider had these luminous spots and stripes on it. It was incredibly visible. You couldn't actually see the spider the way my eyes would see a spider. But when I saw it through the cat's eyes with these luminous streaks and spots on it, I thought, well, no wonder she's going so crazy under the bed chasing the spider. I would too. It was very, very interesting. So after that, I realized cats see things differently than the way we see them. And because of their ability to reflect light, they can see elements of other that we're not aware of. So I might just see a brown spider, but my cat would see it with it. It's like almost like it was painted in neon paint. It was very, very visible. So those are the kind of experiences I had growing up. Now, I was always going to church because I wanted to find out what was going on. Why was I having these experiences? Why was I being told not to talk about it? Well, the reception I got from the different churches was even worse than the advice I got from my parents. They said, that is the work of the devil. You must never open yourself up to it. You must never talk about it. Just pray and read your Bible. And so, what's worse than being thought of as being crazy is to be thought of as being wicked. And that doesn't go over very well socially either. And so I learned to just ignore it and suppress anytime I had an experience. I would just say, no, this is not real. For some reason, my mind is making this up. And it wasn't until years later that I actually left organized religion and decided that I was neither crazy nor wicked, and that I didn't want to be involved in organizations that made me feel bad about myself or people that made me feel bad about myself. And it was after that, I not only I was more comfortable with my experiences, but they got more interesting.
Yes, I definitely can relate to what you said and about feeling scared during the night. What did you feel? Did you feel that there is somebody in the room? What was that feeling that was making you to get under covers and just peek a little bit?
I didn't really know what it was, but I had a lot of upheaval in my life. My mother had split up with my father. We moved all the time into a new place, new place, new place, new neighbors. And then she remarried a man who was very strict, and he was actually very hard on us. And I think part of my fear was just the overwhelm of the situation I found myself in. I did not feel safe. I didn't feel supported. I sure didn't feel loved. My parents were very preoccupied with other things. The only time they had time for me was to get me to help by doing chores, or eventually younger children came along and I had to help look after them and things like that, which is okay. I mean, that's what families are for. But at the time, I couldn't put my finger on. I didn't have language. I didn't have concepts. I didn't have a framework to frame what I was actually even feeling. All I knew is that I was terrified. I was scared that even if my toes were sticking out a little bit, something was going to come bite them off. That kind of real terror I had as a young child. Yeah.
Yes, but it's good that whoever it was, whatever being it was, who really soothed you, yes, supported you, and yeah, and was your protector during this time.
I have a black and white picture in my book. I don't know if you can see that of him. He was very, very fierce looking, but not scary to me because he was my protector.
Yes, if we look at the protectors, for example, even in Buddhism, they're very scary looking, but they're protectors. But that's why they look this way, that they need to protect you. You also mentioned that after you thought, no, I'm not crazy, I'm not wicked. And I think that's very important point.
Mhm.
It's really a turning point for transformation. When you say that, because now you believe in yourself, because if we don't believe in ourselves, who will? And that is very important. And the second point was that you left this organized religion, and that also further supported this transformation that was happening in you. And you said that
Mhm.
those experiences that you had before, they became even more interesting. So what happened? What this transformation led you to, and how you started to experience the world?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that I never, never had a spaceship come and pick me up or beam me aboard or have aliens come and take me. It didn't happen to me like that at all. What happened for me was it was while I was asleep, I would go to other places and have these experiences. And at first, I pretty much thought I was dreaming, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I enjoyed my adventures, I had all kinds of adventures. I remember one time I even was in a different body. The woman who I was had long black curly hair, had olive colored or light brown colored skin. She was meeting a friend at a restaurant. And when she went into the washroom to fix her hair and wash her hands, she looked in the mirror. And that's when I saw that I had a different body. I was a different person during that time. And there's a big difference between my dreams and my transdimensional experiences. When I have a dream, It almost never makes any sense. They're short. Sometimes I might have two or three dreams in one night, or sometimes I won't remember any dreams at all. And they don't make a lot of sense. I can be in a house with all these rooms that just keep more and more rooms, but I can wake up and go, well, I should write that down, but I have no idea what that means. So that's what my dreams are like. Now, transdimensional reality is very, very different. It is very much like lucid dreaming. It's like being asleep, but you're completely conscious and awake and you can make choices. And the adventures that I have in a transdimensional state, I wake up and I remember not every detail, but quite a bit of what happened. When I had my extraterrestrial experience, that happened in 2014. And at first, I thought I was dreaming. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go, wow, wow. My head was full of things to think about. I would make a cup of tea and wander around my apartment, kind of just going, what just happened? I would go to bed that night and I would pick up where I left off when I woke up that very morning. So when you're doing transdimensional travel, time is different. So this happened to me every night for a 3-month period of our time. But while I was there,
Mm-hmm.
could have been days, weeks, even months. And then I would wake up and be right back in my bed, and it would be exactly the very next morning. So I had like 3.5 years of these experiences in only nighttime of a 3-month of our time experience. And it was like while I was there, I was not here. And when I'm here, I'm not there. It's kind of like one or the other, shifting from one to the other way of being. And actually, I did go through a period of time where I wondered if this time I really was crazy because I had never heard about any of this before. I had never heard about transdimensional travels, people going to other dimensions. I didn't even know about other dimensions. I didn't know about any of this. So I did not have the concepts or the language to talk about it. And I wondered if maybe I actually had gone crazy. But then eventually I went, no, I love that other life so much. It's so wonderful. I've learned so much. They taught me so much. I'm not sorry and I'm not crazy. And I just won't tell other people because they can't handle it for whatever reason. Then at the end of the 3 months, it stopped as abruptly as it started. Boom, it was over. But I was left with 3.5 years worth of experiences. And I had to unpack that. And I had to put that into language. And I had to put that into concepts. And I had to come up with a new philosophy, spiritual philosophy on how things work that fit with that experience. Because in some ways, that experience was more real than my experience here. And people often ask me, what's it like being there? And I'll tell you what it's like. It's like going home. It's like going home after being away for way too long.
Karen, we hear about multidimensional worlds, various worlds that exist beyond ours, and from even science fiction writers. It was also shown in movies, and people are talking about those concepts. Why do you think we cannot perceive it like you do? And I'm sure there are other people like you who do, but not everyone. Let's agree that not everyone. What do you think is the reason for that?
Well, I never understood why until very recently. So I had another transdimensional experience about a month ago. And in my transdimensional experience, I was talking to an entity that was teaching me about autism. And I didn't really know that much about autism. I know that I am on the spectrum of autism, but I only know my own life. I don't know what that actually means. You know what I mean? So I was talking and communicating with somebody who was educating me about autism. I woke up in the morning and I went, okay, this is really important. I need to remember this and I need to synthesize this into my life, but I'm not really sure how. Well, that very afternoon, I'm flipping through Facebook and I find out that it's National Autism Awareness Day. And I thought, what chances that it would be what I would have this teaching, this learning, and that it would be National Autism Awareness Day. I thought, wow, that is really weird. So I told a couple of friends of mine who are familiar with transdimensional reality, and they said, oh, that's a synchronicity. That's something to pay attention to. And I said, yeah, it is. So then I made notes. The day after that, I made pages and pages and pages of notes of everything that I could remember. And at that point, I couldn't remember if it was a human or an extraterrestrial who was teaching me or an angel, because I can, unfortunately or fortunately, I can have all kinds of experiences. I didn't really know, but I wrote everything down. Then the day after that, so this is now 3 days after I have my transdimensional experience, on YouTube comes into my feed a series called the Telepathy Tapes. And if any of you have not seen it, I highly recommend that you watch season 1 and when it comes out, season 2 of the Telepathy Tapes. What this researcher found, this does all tie together, so just sort of bear with me for a minute. So, what the researcher found is that non speaking autistic people, so they'd be higher on the spectrum, they have telepathy. They just naturally have telepathy. When you don't use one of your senses, other senses come in and fill in. So, through her research, she found out that we're all capable of telepathy, but non speaking autistic people have it like the strongest. And they talk about their transdimensional experiences. And I'm going, oh my gosh, that is exactly the same as what happens for me. And so they talk about going to night school, how they communicate because they can't speak as letter boards and pointing to alphabet and symbols, and that's how they communicate. It's called spelling. So I realized they go at night to what they call night school where they're taught. And they have all kinds of teachers. Most of them are not human. They have giants and they have angels, and they all have these teachings that teach them other languages, geography, anything that we can go to university to learn about, they can learn at this night school. And they all go to night school when they go to sleep. And another thing that happens for them is they have a place they call the hill. And what the hill is a interdimensional location. So they can just quieten themselves and project and be at the hill where they meet up with all kinds of other beings, but also other autistic people. And autistic people will support each other and teach each other things because some of them, because of the limitations of their condition, they can't be taught the way normal people, sorry, I don't have a better word for it, but how normal people would be taught. And there's actually kind of like different, you could liken it to chat rooms in the non-physical where they go and meet with their friends. So this is very well established. All the research has been done, the experiments, everything. This is now being accepted all over the world as fact. And it's very hard because what neurotypical people are finding out and the researchers and the specialists are finding out is they thought these people who are highly autistic were just not home in their heads, that they weren't there, that they could never learn, they had no intelligence, and now they're humbled to find out there's extreme levels of intelligence. So after watching the telepathy tapes, I went, oh my gosh, and then it hit me all at once, boom. The being that I was being taught by is a non-speaking autistic person somewhere else on the earth. Sorry, it's going to make me cry a little bit because it's so wild, but it's so true. And so for some reason I've been allowed into his chat room, and he was teaching me. And the reason he was teaching me is because I do podcasts, I'm an author. He wants me to tell people the truth about autistic people. So it was huge for me to discover all this, and it all made absolute perfect sense. And for the first time, being an autistic person myself, I don't feel so weird. I feel like this is kind of an honor and a privilege to have, even though other people might consider me as being socially awkward, it actually has paid off in a long run. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but I kind of had to fill in all the different aspects of how I found out what was actually happening. So now they're finding out animals are psychic. all kinds of people are psychic, but we've been taught, no, we're not. No, it's not real, just like ET's not real. And we haven't been told the truth, and we haven't been given the arena to experiment and practice. So I just have to tell you one more quick thing. So I have two cats. I love them. They're my furry babies. I love them so much. One of them was wandering off and he was really worrying me. And after seeing from called the Telepathy Talks, which is another series by the same producer, that animals are psychic. And I went, well, I wonder if he's psychic. So I had a talk with him and I used my words. And I said to him, look, when you wander away, I really worry about you. And I don't mind you going out and wandering, but could you come back and let me know that you're okay? Because that would make me really, really happy. And I didn't hear it, but I knew he said, okay. And the very next time I let him out, he always comes back about every hour, checks in with me, makes sure that I'm okay and that I see him and that he's close by. And then he goes off again. And so he listened and he understood what I had said to him. Just blew me away.
That is amazing. And how do you communicate with those beings? Is it also telepathy in your dreams? Or how this communication happens?
Well, telepathy is not like a lot of people think it is. It is not always in words. Like I'm speaking English right now. Well, when I get telepathy, I sometimes it's in words, but it's a whole bunch of things. And you learn to read the combination of effects. So telepathy for me can mean like little short videos in my mind's eye where I'm seeing something play out that I'm not purposely generating myself. It can be symbols, it can be overlays, and an overlay is something that shows up in your field of vision, but you can still see your full field of vision, but an overlay will show up in your field of vision and you know that it's not actually part of your physical eyes, it's your, I don't know, pineal gland or your portal of your imagination sort of superimposing it so you're seeing it visually. It can also be emotions and it can also be body sensations. So some communications I feel more in my arms, some I might feel more in my stomach or my back even. And depending on the beings that are communicating with me is a different sort of sensation and mix on how I receive it. So I kind of know who I'm receiving telepathy from. But telepathy didn't really come natural to me until I was aboard the big ship, what I call the big ship. And that is, I did not plan that. It was initiated from the big ship, from the extraterrestrial beings initiated. I didn't even know it was coming. But I actually took a course in telepathy. So I just want to give you a little bit of backstory. The big ship is alive, it's not mechanical, made out of metals, fabricated. It's an actual live being, and it has consciousness. And we can communicate directly with it. But in the beginning, of course, I didn't know how. And so I had everybody who finds themselves aboard the big ship, they have a buddy, which is another being who, as close as possible, looks the way we look so that we feel more comfortable with them. And they do all the orientation and they make sure we understand where to eat, how to eat, everything, what we need to do. And she introduced me to it's like a virtual reality system. It's just a thin, narrow band that slipped on the back of my head and two little pods that rest on my temples. Of course, I don't wear glasses when I'm there. I have a measure of health I don't have here, but I would put on that, and that would help me to communicate directly with the big ship, who was also my instructor and my teacher. And so there's four different levels to telepathy. The first one was image was generated. When you're having these kind of training sessions, it's like you're actually there. It doesn't feel like it's in your mind. It feels like it's actually happening. So at first, I would see very simple shapes like a circle or a triangle or something like that. And then what I would do is I would hold that image in my imagination for 3 seconds. And then later, as I got better at it, for 6 seconds, and then for 9 seconds. And if I was able to do that successfully, I was rewarded with what felt like a virtual warm hug. So I don't know if it was a little dopamine rush or something, but it was like a little reward every time I got it right. And then the other half of that was I would see myself, because my eyes were closed, I would see myself as being in a room with maybe a dozen other beings or people. And then this was the hardest part. So I had to learn to communicate with everybody in that virtual room, or maybe just one or two people and keep it private from the rest. And the hardest of all was to keep my imaginings private to myself so they didn't leak out and nobody else was picking up on them. And that's called shielding. And it's really important for bridging between different races of beings and humanoids as kind of like good manners. You wouldn't want to air every thought you have and all your dirty laundry to everybody. That's not appropriate. So you learn shielding. And then there's 4 different levels of that telepathy. The first one was simple shapes. The second level was more complex. So instead of a triangle, it would be a pyramid. Instead of a circle, it would be a sphere. And then by the third level, it was how those and other concepts would interact so that I could start making not sentences, but communicating more complex thoughts and ideas. And then the fourth level is you get very good at that and very good at shielding, where you can keep it to yourself and or share it with one or two people. And until you go through the training, you're not able to go through training for a career or do off-world visits or really do much of anything. And the other advantage to spending the time learning that is the other beings felt more comfortable around me. You know what I mean? And they're all very sensitive because they're very loving beings. They're just very sensitive and very loving and very ethical beings. So it makes sense that they would then be more comfortable with me and I would find it easier to make friends.
Yes. My next question is, we have a lot of science fiction writers. There are so many various books. Where do you think they're getting this information from? How true is this information? Does it in fact reflect the reality that maybe you experienced or not?
You know, that's a tough one because I have no proof that everything I talk about in my book is true. I have no proof. I have no way of convincing anybody. So, of course, I don't try to convince anybody. But I often wondered myself, what's the difference between creating this information and remembering this information? And the other thing, too, that a lot of people don't realize is we can remember the future, things that have not yet happened. We can also remember that as well. And so, what I was thinking was, I guess the way this is different than what I created is, first of all, if I created it, some aspects of this story would not be as good, but some of them would be even better because I would have free will to do anything I want with the characters and create all kinds of storylines. And I didn't. I stuck very true to my experience. And it was interesting because while I was working on it, if I didn't word it accurately, then I would get a telepathic image or message that no, you have to go back and rewrite that. That's not how it happened. Like they were very serious about wanting me to have it as accurate as possible. So, first of all, I would have embellished all over the place and any unanswered questions I would have answered. But then I think also another part of this is, and when I have a memory, it's just smooth. It just, all the aspects of the memory just come. I don't have to think, gee, was she wearing a red dress or a blue dress? Like I don't have anything I have to make up. It just flows so beautifully. Now, another thing I think is perhaps some science fiction is actually true. The people don't know that it's okay to have transdimensional experiences. So I don't know what to say. I have a friend named Preston Dennett, and he's written science fiction and science fact books. He's a very well-known author in the United States. He's been such a wonderful help and inspiration to me. And he even says the same thing. Sometimes he doesn't know whether he's making it up or whether it's real. But I think the important thing is not whether or not it's factual. I think the important thing is, does it create a better world for us to live in? Does it make us behave and do and be in ways that are really productive and harmonious with the planet and our health and create a loving environment that we can do something really good in this world and pass that on. So to me, that is the more important thing. Does the story help you to be a better person? In this case, of course, this experience, which is my real experience, really help me in so many ways to understand love, what love is, how it works, that it's a frequency, that it's a powerful force. Even, well, even having telepathy really helps us to care about how other people feel in our presence and around us, all kinds of things like that. So I think that some science fiction could actually be transdimensional, but we don't have concepts or language for it. We're told, no, no, that can't be real. It's just easier to label it as science fiction in some ways.
This is what I think, that sometimes people are very sensitive, and of course, because of our norms and societal views, people don't let themselves to really understand what's happening, but they sense this or receive this information and they put it out. That's so-called science fiction. And what is also interesting, that this science fiction very often become a reality. Yes, so something that was a science fiction 20, 50 years ago today is a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially in terms of technologies.
Mm-hmm.
It means that information that they bring actually becomes real. Maybe it is a real information from the future that they in some way or form received. What do you think about that?
Well, I totally agree. I call that remembering the future. And they say that time is not really a long line. It's like a spiral and it's like steel wool. It's all wrapped up together. And that we can actually see places in time. Time is actually a construct that's been created in our three-dimensional reality to kind of make us good workers. You have to be at work at 9 and you have lunch at 12 and you get off work at 4 and you have supper at 6 and Monday through Sunday. But we know that the calendars and the time has been distorted to keep us off balance, just like the calendars. If we were just following the seasons, we would probably be healthier and happier than following a calendar.
And what is time like in those other worlds that you've visited?
Well, we don't really think about it. So I'll give you an example. Once I had some training, I got to go and have a school kind of environment. I was studying botany. I was fascinated by plants. While I was aboard the big ship, they don't keep livestock and they don't kill animals. They would actually, they're too tender-hearted to be doing that kind of work. It's not that they're against eating meat, it's just that they're very loving beings. And so the food would just grow on in every department, in the long corridors to get to one area to another. There's these beautiful, all these plants growing along the walls and everything. And people would just pick and nibble and eat. And then maybe once a day we'd get together and have a bit of a meal. But because we're all psychically linked, I would just feel hungry for my main meal and I would go down to where we would make our food and my friends would just arrive at the same time. They'd start feeling a little bit the same way around the same time. So nobody has a schedule. You sleep what you need to sleep. There's no day or night aboard the big ship. You sleep when you need to sleep, you get up when you want to get up. But there is a certain rhythm that's pretty natural. So all the beings, after we wake up around, within a few hours of each other, we would go down to the community baths. And the baths were beautiful. It's not water in the baths, it's actually baths. I'm not saying it right. BATH, bath. And they're public. And the fluid actually acts as nutrient and everybody's very quiet when they're there and they fall into a kind of a meditative state of relaxation. It's a beautiful community event that starts each awake cycle. Then after that we get dressed and we go off and we do whatever we want to do. Whatever we want to do is what we want to do. Now, because we're psychically linked or telepathically linked, somebody needed help in a certain department or with a project or something, other people would sort of pick up on it and go in and help them. But there's no schedule. Like, I guess the way I understand it, the way I write about it in my book, is it's kind of like they are at perfect harmony with the chaos. So if you know anything about chaos theory says that there is divine order within what appears to us as chaos. And so there's a divine order. And of course, everything's very quiet because nobody uses voice language aboard the big ship. It's very peaceful. It's very loving, peaceful, calm atmosphere. And we would just go and start doing whatever we want to do. We'd eat when we were hungry. We would work when we wanted work. If we wanted to do recreation, we could do that. But it all works. It just naturally all flows. And there is a tremendous sense of order without any schedules.
Very, very interesting. How do you feel the aging process goes there? Because we know that with time we age. Mhm.
Ah, good question. Good question. Well, they live a lot longer than we do. I would say at least 500 years. So within the first 100 years, that's when you would, if you decided to have offspring, form a family, you would do that. But generally, after the first 100 years, not too many beings actually want to start families and doing things like that. There's a shift in consciousness. So by the time they're about 200 years old, they take that energy that they would use for sexual relations or reproduction, and they convert that energy into spiritual gifts, like being able to communicate using telepathy, long distances. They become elders, they become resource people. They have a different function after about 200 years. Now, when they get to be 500 years, it isn't like someone says, oh, that's it, your time's up, you got to go. It isn't like that. It's just an average. They could live quite a bit longer. They're so beautifully healthy. And then what they do is when they're ready to go on to the next level of reality. So we're taught, oh, you die, your body's dead, and that's it, it's over. But if you're good, you go to heaven. And if you're bad, you go to hell. They don't think in those terms. They see that each incarnation is a cycle of life that has its own qualities and objectives. So when they get to the point where they go, it's time for me to go on to my next level of reality. And then they plan the day and they just very peacefully, with no need to be involved with medical or medicine or brutality, nothing like that. It's kind of like they lay down and go to sleep, but then they leave their body and that's it, they're gone. And it's celebrated. People are very happy that this loved one has gone on to their next stage of their journey. That's how death is handled there. But they live a lot longer. And even I myself, while I was there, I was so healthy and it was really hard to come back, and I'd wake up in the morning and I couldn't see and I'd have to fumble for my glasses, and my back would hurt when I'm trying to get out of bed. I'm going, oh no, I'm back. And I couldn't wait to be back in transdimensional spaces again. The other thing that is kind of sad is after seeing these beings and how beautiful and healthy they are, if I was just out running errands, like going to the grocery store or went to pick something up, I couldn't help but notice how sick humans are, really weak and really sick. There's something seriously wrong with humanity. This is not how we're meant to be. And now we may not be in the beautiful condition that my extraterrestrial brothers and sisters are, but certainly it was never meant to be like this. And it's shocking and very disturbing and even depressing to see what's become of even me and my body and my neighbors and my family, and knowing it could be so much different.
Yeah, what do you think keeps them so healthy compared with us?
Well, I think a combination of things. First of all, they're very spiritual beings. They know what love means, they know how to love. So, love is not just romantic ideal. Love includes, it's like a basket that includes different attributes that need to be exercised in harmony. So, for instance, love includes patience, not just being patient with other people, but patient with ourselves. Love includes self control. So, I might want to go and eat a chocolate cake, but I'm not going to, because that's not what my body needs. And that is not in my best interest for my health. So I wouldn't do that. So I would eat very carefully, which I do, especially now, because I want to build up my body, especially because I'm not getting any younger. I'm almost 70 years old now. I want to be in good health. That's what is important to me at my age. Love is also mildness. So if you're around a million, well, I wasn't subjected to the all million. There could be as many as a million beings on the big ship, but maybe I'm only, seeing regularly several hundred beings. If everybody is mild, there's a sense of safety. You never have to worry about anybody getting mad at you or hurting you or getting even. Like there's a complete absence of that way of being. So I would say that these beings are at our next stage of development where we're headed to. So once we say, no, we're not going to do war anymore, we're not going to kill people anymore, and we're not going to hurt people anymore. And once we start learning how to love properly, like the extraterrestrials do, then we're going to be coming into the same phase that they're at. They're not that far ahead of us. Some extraterrestrials, they might be millions of years ahead of us. These beings were not. They were very, very close to us. So what else is included? I covered patience and self-control and mildness. And there's several others, like, for instance, we don't want to be jealous of other people. Whatever they have, we can have too. It's not that hard to get. We don't have to have any bad feelings whatsoever. And there's quite a few other qualities. I get into it in great detail in my book. So these beings have, for multiple generations, have this culture of peacefulness and faithfulness, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's got to have an effect on the body. In fact, we know it does because our emotions have frequencies. Our bodies run on frequencies. So that would help our bodies. The other thing is there's no recreational drug use, there's no alcohol, there's no cigarettes, they just don't need it. It's just, why would they do that? Their lives are already pretty close to perfect. The foods they eat are wonderful. They're fresh and they're growing all over the place. And you gather what you want, you meet up with your friends. They're not kitchens, they have what I call or meal centers, and you go like the big ship. Okay, I didn't talk about what the big ship's capable of. So the big ship is able to create anything we need instantly. So I don't know if it's a biological nanotechnology, but everything just assembles, and when you're done with it, it deassembles. So it's very much like magic. We would meet at these stations, and there would be cooling equipment and warming equipment, and different beings would show how they learned how to put different foods together for different flavors and different amounts of energy and all of that. And I thought it was ever so wonderful. I was very, very fond of eating and learning how to do foods. So there are, like, for instance, some plants that I pick it and I would eat it, and it would be really bitter. And then one of my extraterrestrial friends would say, "Oh, no, you got to mix it with these kind of berries and these kind of petals off of this flower. Now try it." Of course, they didn't tell me in language, it's all telepathy. And then I would taste it. I'd go, "Oh my gosh, is that ever delicious?" See, things that I never would have taught. So kind of like extraterrestrial cuisine, I guess. And and so the food is very pure. They never use chemicals. They never genetically modify anything. No, plants are slowly introduced to each of these big ships. The big ship is what many people would consider to be like a mothership, very huge, huge populations. They're huge, and they don't go anywhere. So this is another thing. Took me a long time to understand, where is the big ship located? Well, I just want to quickly explain that if you take a Venn diagram is separate things that have a little space where they overlap. So if you imagine a huge Venn diagram that's like a daisy, arranged like a daisy, and the petals on the daisy could represent different dimensional realities, different timelines, a different universe within the multiverse, the spiritual realms, and they all overlap at the center at one little spot. This is not literal. This is just to give you an analogy to understand interdimensional space. And so the big ship would sit at what would be the equivalent of the center of this daisy, so that beings can come and go from all different realities. And yeah, so I don't remember why I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry. But so it's an interdimensional space. That's where the big ship is. So it's not here, and it's not there, it's not anywhere, and it's here. And it makes sense that that's how I was able to have, I don't know, my light body or my auric body or my spiritual self, or because I don't remember being there in this body. I was in a different body. And that's how they're able to do it. And so it's actually a fairly easy process. And then I have a clone body there that I use when I go there so that I can have the physical experience so that I could go to off world realities and discover all kinds of really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm very curious about their structure,
Mhm.
society structure. Is it hierarchical like we have?
All I can
How
say is
does
they
it
all
work?
vibe on the love harmonic. Nobody wants to scare anybody else or frighten them, their feelings. So there's such a high level of respect and love for all beings that nobody is going to do anything to hurt anybody or inconvenience anybody. And because everything we want or need is free and available. They don't even use money. There's no competition for resources. The only place I saw any competition at all was when they were doing what we would call sports, recreational things. Then there's a bit of competition. But basically the it would go on until one party or one group gives in or concedes and says, that's it, okay, you win, which is more likely to happen, then, that's what ends it. So there's none of that. So they don't need structure. They're truly, truly loving beings. They don't need structure. Even the engineers who look after the needs of the big ship, that's all done through telepathy, small group of what I would call engineers. And they can communicate with the ship and find out if the ship needs anything or something needs addressing in some department or whatever. There's no technology except for the little headset that I was telling you about for the virtual reality that taps you right into the big ship, the consciousness of the big ship. The beings that are born on the big ship, they don't need that. They can just communicate directly. They just learn how. But they also have tablets that are about the size of my book. And they're just made out of clear material. I don't know if it's resin or crystal or what it's made out of. It has no buttons or ports. And in the beginning, before you get a grasp on the telepathy or the virtual headsets, you can use them and you can have them flat and you can have a holographic image that comes up on top, or you can just see it flat the way we would see a screen on most of the devices today. So that was the only technology. There's no being sitting at all these desks with all these computer things to recalibrate. None of that. Absolutely none. Zero. Very, very peaceful, very beautiful, quiet.
Interesting. Very interesting. What about artificial intelligence? Is it developed there like it's developing here very rapidly? We know that we have lots of development. What about in that space on a big ship?
I didn't see any evidence of artificial intelligence. Now, the consciousness of the big ship is very much like artificial intelligence, and everything, like when I was working on my lessons, it would know where we left off or what I needed to do more work on. And it stores information the way we would store computer information on the cloud. So it is always able to store information, but there's no need for AI because you collectively put a million beings together and the big ship, which is very, very ancient, very, very old, together. There's nothing we don't already know that we don't know how to fix or do or be, or it's just not necessary. And we can just tap into the big ship and tap right in if we want to know something. Or when I was there, I started by using the tablets and then I went to the virtual reality system. That's how I was able to learn about all kinds of things, intergalactic resettlement programs, how that all works. Oh, just tons of stuff. Oh, pretty much. I just gotta tell people buy the book. I think you'd really enjoy it. I get into a lot of detail. You'll learn a lot. And when I wrote my book, I was also careful to write it in such a way that I bring you with me, so you get a sense of what I went through, what I was feeling, what I was tasting, seeing, smelling, everything.
That is absolutely amazing. And I'm very curious about the family structure. Do they have regular families like we do, or is it different?
Now that I was surprised. Okay, I was surprised. It's very much like our traditional family values. I was really surprised. So, for instance, if only a male and a female come together to have children, And that's because the female has the equipment to carry the baby and to conceive, and the male has his part to donate. And we have male and female energy and purposes for being, and they blend so well together. That is, I think, created by God, designed by God. That seems to work. And I've got nothing against transgender people or what they're trying to do or gay people, not at all. In fact, aboard the big ship, unless you want to start a family, you can live however you want to live. There is what we would call gay and lesbian and all kinds of relationships, but they don't have names for it. They don't have the constructs that we have here on Earth. They just have freedom because they're in a completely loving environment. But just say, you have a male and a female and they want to come together and they want to have a family. Well, first they get to know each other really well. That's number one. Number two is if they decide they're going to have offspring, they plan to stay together until the offspring reach the age of maturity. So there's no divorce, there's no separation, there's no fights, there's none of that. So they already know what they're getting themselves into, and there's no rules. Like nobody says you have to do it this way or marriage the way we would do marriage. No, there's none of that. They just take the responsibility very, very seriously. Then they bring children into the world. They raise them together and they have extended families in the living quarters. Lots and lots of beings live with extended family. It's a very positive, very good thing. We see some cultures still do that here on Earth. And then, like I said, when the youngest child is then old enough to be on its own, and then the mother and father would decide, do we stay together or do we separate? Do we want to pursue our careers? Because they got 500 years or more, right? So there's lots and lots of living and adventures and things that they could do. But they definitely have the urge to form families and to have children. They absolutely do. Now, the other thing I want to tell you that's really cool about them is the parents always have the ability to shield their children. So you take someone like me who comes on board, I don't know how to do telepathy, my thoughts are all over the place. They would be able to shield their children so that children do not pick up on any of that because the parent has the authority over what the child is exposed to, and they take it very seriously. And I don't know how they do that, but they do it.
That's amazing. Any unusual professions or careers that you found there that maybe we don't have here on Earth?
Well, I'd like to tell you about a concert I went to, which sure taught me a lot. So I have friends that I made while I was on board that were my very close, close friends. In the image over here beside me, the redheaded with the beards, that is actually a male and female, but the female also has facial hair in that particular group of beings. And then over here, you see the redheaded, sort of blue skinned woman. She was my buddy. She's the one who stayed with me and got me used to everything. And we became very, very close friends, the four of us. So I knew that this concert was coming and they were all excited, especially I call them the twins. They're not really twins. They're not related. They're like what we would consider husband and wife, right? But they're so excited and they came and got me and I couldn't wait to go. We walked to the what you would call an auditorium, and there's a small stage and the seating was really cool. The seating was kind of higher at the back and lower at the front towards the stage. So it kind of felt like being in a big bowl. And that way everybody could see clearly. Nobody had to go like this to try to see around a tall person or anything like that. And so out comes these musicians onto the stage and they were playing musical instruments, and some of them nothing like what we have here, and some of them also used their voice, but they didn't use language. But while they're performing, they also transmit telepathically. So a big part of the show was what we were receiving in the way of images in our mind's eye and body sensations and emotions and symbols and all of these things to go with the music and with the voice work. So I consider that unusual. And at one point, I will spare you all the details. You can read about it in my book. But at one point, the vision and the emotions were so intense, I couldn't shield it anymore. So everybody is respectful and they all shield their feelings and their thoughts and everything because you don't want to ruin the experience for someone else because we're all telepathic, right? Anyway, so I was doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden, at one point, the show took such an emotional turn that I couldn't contain myself and I just started sobbing, crying my eyes out. And I was so embarrassed because I knew I was ruining the performance for the other people there. And I was scared and I didn't know what to do. And I looked to my buddy and she was just smiling and very happy with me. And I thought, how could she be happy? I'm ruining the show. And the more I tried to stop, the worse it got. And pretty soon there were other beings around me and they were sobbing and crying. It was very contagious. I went, oh no. So then the performers, they stopped performing and they came down from the stage. They walked up to me and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in big trouble. I'm in big trouble now. But turned out they congratulated me because that is how they conclude their performance. They will keep performing until somebody completely loses it and everybody starts to lose it. And that's part of the process of the performance. So after that, I was less self conscious.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that is amazing, amazing. And how we can perceive the performance on how many different levels and how this can be translated. And that's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. How can other people
Mm.
maybe become more open to these experiences with the transdimensional beings and worlds?
Question. Well, the first thing is if we think we might have had a transdimensional experience, and a transdimensional experience is like one step further than having a lucid dream or doing remote viewing or astral projection. I think it's all part of the same phenomenon. If you think you've had a transdimensional experience or a dream that was too real, you had more control than what you would normally have in a dream, don't brush it off. Don't tell yourself you're crazy. Don't tell yourself you imagined it. Allow that to be a real thing in your life. And chances are it is a real thing in your life. Then there are other things that I give tips in my book on how to make contact. One is to become a more loving, responsible human being. I'm not saying that you have to be perfect, but working on it, working on patience. And the funny thing about all the attributes that go along with love is we need to exercise them towards ourselves first. Patient with ourselves, self control. We need to take care of our body because this is the instrument we're going to use to facilitate the transdimensional contact. This is technology. We are technology. A lot of people don't realize that. So there's another technique that people can use. And I like to go for walks. When I go for a walk, sometimes after spending so much time on screen time, I'm always used to looking straight ahead all the time at a screen. But when I go for a walk, I like to see out the sides and the top and the bottom of my vision. That's called your peripheral vision. So for transdimensional contact, very similar to that. I don't have a language for it, so I had to make all these terms up. So very similar to peripheral vision is learn to listen to the peripheral realms of your consciousness. So stop being so focused. I mean, spend time being focused, but spend also time practicing not being focused. And that goes very beautifully with meditation and all the different meditation states where you're allowing to come in instead of projecting all the time and defining reality. And then there's another technique that I use, and I haven't been telling people about it because I thought that it would discredit me, but I'm going to tell you the truth anyway. I've never told anybody this on a show before. And that is make good use of pareidolia. Do you know what pareidolia is? Pareidolia is when you look at a rock or a piece of wood and you sort of see a face there. Or you look at the clouds and it looks like a dragon, or it looks like a clown, or you know what I mean? That's pareidolia. And we're told, oh, that's just your imagination and that's just your brain. And it just turns shapes into things that we recognize. That's just how we work as humans. But no, I think it's a little bit more than that. You can use pareidolia to communicate with unseen realms because it involves the imagination, it involves those technologies. So I would recommend people you make use of pareidolia. I'm going to actually do a YouTube video about this because it's very important. Now, sometimes pareidolia can be a little scary. Sometimes it looks like, evil creatures or something. I think that's also what's happening to people who use psychedelics. Now, I myself did not use psychedelics for any of these experiences. They happened organically for me. But practicing pareidolia, so you just happen to catch, you're out in the woods and you happen to look over at a tree trunk and you sort of see a face in there. Well, maybe that is the tree or perhaps other dimensional realities wanting you to know they're there.
Yeah, so in general, as I understand, it's all around us. So there is no separation. It's really how do we look at the reality around us? Do we really notice things and allow ourselves to notice? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And a lot of communication happens on a level where we're not using our conscious minds. We're thinking. And we've been raised to be very left brained, very logical, methodical, mechanical, because that's going to make the best kind of compliant workers in the workforce for society. But we're not given that extra amount. I mean, yes, you can be an artist or an author, but we're not really encouraged in a meaningful and practical way to use the right side of our brain as much. And I think it takes both sides working in harmony. I think that's the male and the female energies, the yin and the yang, and we need to work together and in harmony. And when we do that, I think we're going to have more paranormal experiences and start noticing things. And then the other thing is the more podcasts people watch like this, the more they're going to have language for what they're experiencing and a validity, want to validate what they're going through as being a real thing and not made up. And I know some people think that's going to lead to chaos, but I disagree. It's brought nothing but order into my life. And there's order and chaos anyway. It's just a different kind of order than what we're sold and programmed to use.
Yes. And I agree that podcasts and different videos, educational like this, help people to even start noticing certain things and not just brush them off, but pay attention. And you are doing amazing work producing those podcasts. You are an author of Quantum Guides show with Karen Holton and Aliens and Angels podcast with Karen Holton. So the images behind you, maybe you can tell our listeners more about that and they might listen and learn more about the amazing things that you have to share.
Thank you. Okay. So on this side, I have an image of three females. The one in the center represents me. It's not an actual selfie. Well, actually, AI created these images as to my instruction so that I had some images to include in my book. And what I love about this image, I used to have very long white hair. So the middle woman represents me. But you see, on one side, you've got someone who looks very human, very young, beautiful. And on the other side, we have someone who might look like what we would call a stereotypical gray. And the thing is, I've got quite a few images also in my book so that you could get an idea of what some of these beings look like. So they look quite close to us, but there are definitely some differences.
Yeah.
And I think it's important not to stereotype extraterrestrials, not to think, oh, they're all scary grays, or they're all Nordics with blonde hair, or they're all this or that. No, they're not. There are so many. Our basic structure is the same. We're all related. We're all humanoids. We're all the same species, but we're different family lines and races. And just like here on Earth, depending on where you were born and what genetics your parents had, you will have all kinds of diversity in the way you look. Even in same families, someone might have big ears and someone else might have small eyes. It's all different, right? Same is true for ET. So even amongst a specific race of ETs, there's huge diversity. And I think it's important for people to remember that because they come in all different shapes and sizes. But the beings that I met, I consider them all beautiful, healthy, and peaceful and very loving. On the other side, I have my copy of my book. It's available on Amazon. I also have a second book that I have written. This is the author copy. So when you order this, it won't have the stripe across it. This is called Transdimensional 2 Meet the Greys picture book.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the first 2 chapters, I have 8 different people talk about their contact with the Greys, what that was like for them, what they learned. And then the rest is all pictures. So I start off with pictures of Grey males. And again, they're all different because they come from all different family lines and races. And I also have females, a whole chapter on Grey females. I've got the Grey children. I've got hybrids, a chapter on hybrids, all different kinds, even very almost human looking Greys. And the reason I put this book together was so that people could reduce their fear. We've been told so many stories, and I'm not saying that they're not true. I don't know. Maybe they are true. I feel bad that people are having these bad experiences, but there's a stereotypical Grey being and they abduct people and they do gross things to your body. And, but that's only one tiny, tiny little piece of the whole picture. And so my aim with the second book is to reduce the fear. So after people have flipped through this a few times and thought about what they're looking at, you realize they're not that different. What they don't have is the pigment in their skin to reflect color in our visible range of the light spectrum. So they all look like they're Grey, but they can see different dimensions of light that we can't pick up on. And so to us, they appear to be Grey. So that's why I did the second book. So I don't know what my next project will be. Got my 2 podcasts. The Quantum Guide Show is guests who have something positive and informational to offer the world. And it's usually a little bit on the fringe, a little bit unusual. And aliens and angels as people, I only have guests who have actually experienced extraterrestrials or angels so that people can hear their stories and get more familiar with them and be less afraid as well.
Thank you so much, Karen. In general, like you said, in our society, there is this notion that there is a threat that is coming from extraterrestrial beings. And some of people and scientists cautioned us from even trying to find and connect with the extraterrestrial beings, trying to find other planets, other worlds, because it might bring something that would be detrimental to us. What do you think about this? And also, what do you think if we would become as a society more open instead of more closed to those other transdimensional beings?
Well, there's evidence that extraterrestrials have been, or they might be transdimensionals, that might be a better word. They have been visiting Earth people probably for thousands of years. If they were going to hurt us, they would have done it by now. And the kind of atrocities I have seen humans perpetuate on other humans, far worse than anything I've ever heard of coming from extraterrestrials. So I don't think there's a basis for fear. Now, if you've had a bad experience, of course, it's natural that you would be afraid. But basically, I would always remember that all extraterrestrial beings have telepathy. So you don't need to touch them, go with them. You don't need to do anything that make you feel unsafe, even if you really are safe. You can just communicate with them through mind to mind, through consciousness. You can always do that. If they're not willing to do that with you, then I don't know, spend your time in better company. But I'm pretty sure they have more to lose than we do because our militaries are picking them up and keeping them hostage, treating them cruelly with experiments and drugs and all kinds of things. If they ever had a reason to fight back, you would expect it, but they don't. They don't take it out on us. They have great compassion and empathy for us and for where we're at. The other thing is, I guess I'm a bit skeptical when it comes to governments. We have been lied to about our history, about who we are, about extraterrestrials, about medicine, about religion, philosophy, so much. Why would I believe the experts now? Why would I believe them when over and over and over again I have seen that this is just my personal opinion based on my own experience. I don't think that humans can so much be trusted. And I don't think the problem lies with the extraterrestrials or the transdimensionals.
And what do you think would happen with our world if we would become more open to this communication?
Oh, well, we'd certainly learn a lot. We'd learn a lot, but there are powers that be that do not want that because then they can't continue the masquerade. And it's like the story of the emperor who has no clothes or the wizard from the Wizard of Oz. Soon as you see what's really going on, you lose faith in them and they lose their power. And they don't want that. They like their power. So personally, I think it's good for us to be more open.
You. And I had this question because I became very curious after listening to one of the interviews that was taken with you. And you said that you had a chance to visit one world or one dimension which was more developed technologically and another less.
Yeah.
And you said that actually your experience was in a way better in the world with the less developed technology than with the more developed technology. So, what was the difference, and what was the reason for you feeling better in the less developed technologically world?
Well, some of it I can put my finger on, and some of it I can't. So, in the low technology world, this is in the context of the resettlement program. So, there are many, many, many worlds. In fact, almost every world, there is problems with volcanoes and asteroids and earthquakes and natural disasters, and the beings need to resettle. So, the ancestors of the low technology group that I visited, they chose to not take technology with them. They just wanted to make everything from what grows around them, the food that's available. They just wanted to do it that way. That is their philosophy. That's what they wanted. And that's what they did. And it was a lovely experience. I get into it in great detail in my book. I spent a day out hunting beetles with the children and learning how to weave mats. And oh, it was just, I don't know why, I just really liked it. I really liked it. Now, then another time I had a high technology experience. So, a low technology settlement would happen where the weather is good and there's nothing gonna like dinosaurs to eat them or no big threats. But in the higher the threat possibility, the higher the technology, because you don't want to go through all the effort of settling on a specific world and then have it all fall apart because you didn't plan properly. Do you know what I mean? And so in the high tech world, it wasn't so much the way the settlement was as the other creatures that lived there. And so the second world that I talk about, and again, I get into great detail in my book, it was a water world and it had huge storms, really, really devastating storms. So all of the habitat and places where these beings lived had the ability to come up to the surface when the weather was nice, but could go deep, deep below the ocean when the weather was bad so that they were always safe and always protected. But they also had a culture and scientific background of wanting to do research in a water world. Many of the big creatures that live in the oceans, they wanted to find out more about them. So, although I was not told this, I have a feeling that some of the creatures that they share space with are highly intelligent, even though they may just appear to be fish to us. You know, like our whales are very intelligent, more than what we might even know. And so there was going to be some bad weather. And so they told us over dinner that they were going to submerge the habitat down under the ocean, but that there would be pressure equalization and everything. We wouldn't even know if, unless we looked out the window and saw, that we were underwater. So I went, okay, I didn't expect any problem. But during the middle of the night, I woke up and I had a really uneasy feeling, just uneasy feeling. And there's big windows in all the rooms because the habitats are constructed with the aim of gathering data about this world and the beings and creatures that live in the ocean. And here I saw three of these huge, what looked like fish with these huge eyes. staring at me while I was sleeping, and it just creeped me right out. It just creeped me right out. Now, I wasn't told this, but I suspect there was a telepathic ability they had that they were reading me somehow. And I felt violated. Nobody asked permission to find out, but I guess amongst these fish or whatever they were, I don't know. I didn't find out. I didn't stay long enough to find out. They're just very curious, and that's something that they do. And I should have been given that information, but for some reason I didn't pick up on it or I didn't get it. And I felt horrible afterwards. The next day, I felt like I was suffocating. I felt like I was wearing a tight suit that was too tight. And they couldn't figure out why nobody else was having that reaction, but I really did. But I'm also very, very sensitive on an intuitive level. And maybe that's why, I don't know. But after 2 days, they had to rise up to the surface when the storm was over and take me back to the big ship. And it took me 2 or 3 days to feel comfortable again. So it wasn't the technology that was bothering me. It was these deep sea creatures that I just felt kind of violated, I just did.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did all those experiences that you received while doing this transdimensional travel change your perspectives on the life here? What was the main change that they brought into your life?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe perspective through which you look at the world, or anything.
For a long time, I've believed that we need to become the change we want to see. But that was much, much more after having my extraterrestrial experiences. When I saw how these beings live, what life could be like for us, how our health could improve, how everything could be better. I just want to tell people, which is why I wrote the book. I wanted people to hear about it and know about it and have it in their minds that this is possible and we can have this too. And so it helped me to be more resolute in my self control, for instance, what I eat and what I spend my time doing. And it just made me appreciate that this is not all that is. This is just where humanity is right now. And that we can step by step make it better by changing our own lives and being kind to each other. Kindness is so important. And that's another attribute of the beings on the big ship. They're very kind, they're very generous, they're very loving. Yeah, I've got quite a few experiences in my book. Everybody's going to really like it.
Yes, I already want to read it. And Karen, what was the most surprising thing that you noticed, that you learned or experienced over this time of your extraterrestrial journeys?
Oh, I don't know. One thing that surprised me is there are some humanoids who live in an aquatic environment. So, you know how we think of mermaids, a little bit like that, except they don't have fins or tails. They look more like us, but there are some physiological differences. And their fluid environment is not water. I don't know what it is, but it has the same oxygen content as what we have here on Earth, what we breathe. And so I was actually able to spend some time. I actually went to see a shaman who was of that race of beings. And so I actually spent some time in the tank exchanging my gas breathing for fluid breathing for that experience, which was very, very interesting. Yeah, but I don't want to tell you too much about him because it's sort of the end of my extraterrestrial experience and it's quite profound and very deeply personal what happened to me with the shaman. It was amazing.
Of course. And it's just my curiosity. One more question. How do the cities there look like? And why I'm asking? Because I just recorded a podcast about a change that is starting to happen here on Earth, that people are moving towards more so-called biophilic designs that are more conducive to our mental health, to restructuring, designing cities in a different way that people would feel better. And you mentioned that on that ship, people already are of a very good health. So I was very curious what structure to their cities, to their environment they have that is different from ours. And is it contributing to a better mental health and well-being?
Well, I can give you two examples. One is aboard the big ship. So the big ship, as I mentioned, is alive.
Yeah.
And so all the corridors are tubular and there's no square angles. None at all. Everything's tubular or ovoid. The rooms, whether there was classroom or whether it was a place where we were watching a performance or anything like that, they all had rounded sort of ceilings that would come down, slope down to the floor. Everything is seamless but very ovoid in shape. There's just no squares. Everything flows very beautifully in that environment. And the walls and stuff are not like cement or metal. They're like a soft kind of leather that have a little bit of sponginess to the touch. They're very, very comfortable to be in that environment. When I was on the low technology world, everybody lived in tree homes because they have that particular world creates a terrific amount of dew every night. And so everything is soaking wet. So any kind of houses that were built on the ground would be soaked all the way through by the time people woke up in the morning. So beautiful, ornate tree houses. Everything was made out of natural materials. And a lot of the rooms, again, were round or oval in shape. I got a picture of the community in my book. And everything's made out of natural fabric. So I think that's really, really important, softening the lines and making the building supplies very, very natural because everything has frequency and affects our bodies different ways. I also visited another world. I went to what they call a naming ceremony. On that particular world, every child, when it's a baby, has a naming ceremony. And it was very beautiful. But we went into the structure that was very much like a cathedral, like the ones from the 15th century here on Earth. Very, very beautiful. No furniture. The ceiling was covered in crystals that looked like stars, and the floor would be built out of something like some kind of natural stone, but it was highly polished and it reflected the ceiling so perfectly. The doorways, everything were big archways, very, very beautiful. But not a lot of furniture. You don't see a lot of furniture aboard the big ship. You don't see furniture either because the ship will just create it when you want it because it's telepathic. So you want a nice comfy chair, it just materializes just like magic right in front of you. It's very, very cool, very technical.
And what about books? Do they have books the way we have them and they write, or it's a different concept?
I did not see any books. I saw tablets and the virtual reality headsets and everything. All the information is just free flowing. It's not contained
Yeah.
the way we would contain it in a book. Yeah, I didn't see books.
Yeah, that's amazing. Karen, thank you so much. Can you tell our listeners where they can find your book, where they can listen to your podcast, where they can connect with you?
Thank you. I'm on all audio podcasts, and I'm also on Telegram, Odyssey, X, Rumble, YouTube. I'm pretty easy to find. If you go into a Google search and you just type in @ sign and Karen Holton TV, you'll see everything available there. My books you could order from Amazon anywhere in the world. Interestingly, some people are having trouble finding this book on Amazon. When they put it into the general search, it doesn't come up. So they have to go and click in the menu, the Amazon menu where it has books. Click on that. You get a new search bar, then type in the name of the book and it'll pop right up. So I'm not sure why. I thought that was interesting that it's not always easy to find, but everyone can order it anywhere where there's Amazon. I do sell some signed copies from my website. I have a website. It's www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com. I'm a different kind of health coach. I also have some services for people who want some private counseling. I am a social worker. I have my degree from the University of Victoria, and I've done counseling for people who have substance use issues and things like that, but also for people who are trying to understand what they've been through. They've had some paranormal experience or have seen a Sasquatch or who knows what. You can't just always go to the local professionals and get help because they may not even believe in it. So I also offer that. And I guess that's about it. I'm pretty easy to find. Thank you.
Yes, and we will put all this information into our podcast notes, even the link to your book that is difficult to find. So
Thank you.
our listeners can just click on it and go right there. Thank you so much, Karen. Again, I ask you many questions. I would ask even more, but we have limited time. Is there anything that maybe I didn't ask you, but you would like to mention it to our listeners? That would be the best time right now to do it.
Well, I think the universal principle to focus on is love. Find out what love means. Love is not just a romantic ideal. It's being kind to people, even if we don't want to. It's about being patient with ourselves and patient with other people. That one I work on every single day. Patience. And all of these things are like juggling balls, and you got to keep them all going at the same time. It's not easy to be a truly loving human being, but I believe it's the fastest way to change our reality for the better.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
We wish you all the best. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And of course, we wish you all the best and looking forward to your new podcast editions and towards finding more about what you told us from your books. Dear listeners, did you enjoy today's magical tale? Then take a piece of that magic with you. Visit our Etsy shop, Mythic Facets, for handmade jewelry and phone accessories inspired by myths, legends, and the power of natural gemstones. That's Mythic Facets on Etsy, where magic meets everyday life. Until next time.